me, right? And what God did in his sovereignty was he allowed Paul to find Timothy. He was a young Jewish Greek boy in Asia Minor. He found him, and Timothy came and followed Paul around for years. He became Paul's mentoree, or his disciple, his buddy, his intern, you could say in today's culture. And everywhere we see Paul going, there's Timothy there. But sometimes what Paul would do is he would leave Timothy somewhere to get some jobs done. So what's happened here is that Timothy is in Ephesus. He's serving as a pastor of this brand new church, all new believers. Nobody even knows how to do church. So Paul writes Timothy 2 letters. This is the second one. And this one is very personal. And he says, you then, my son. Now imagine, here's Timothy. He's been left in Ephesus. And Paul's over in Greece somewhere doing something. And I imagine Timothy's a little nervous, a little scared. We call him Timothy because he doesn't need an aggressive personality. And yet Paul writes, he says, you then, my son. I see Timothy opening this scroll that's been delivered to him personally. And he opens the scroll and Paul says, you then, my son. And he goes, aww. Ain't that sweet? Isn't that wonderful? His little chest swelled up. Now, he was probably around 30 years old as far as we can tell, but in that culture back then, if you were a young single guy, you were like a youth. So 30 is young in their culture, and he's not married as far as we know. So his chest begins to swell. Paul called me his son. Now know this, brothers and sisters. Just like God called Jesus my son, just like Paul calls Timothy my son, I believe today that God wants us to understand that when he sees us as his sons and daughters. You then, my son. You then, my daughter. And I can know that I have confidence in him. I told you about receiving Christ when I was in the 7th grade. That was 50 years ago. And do you know, I'm more certain that I know him and that I'll go to heaven when I die than that I see you and I see you. Confidence. You then, my son. I know that I belong to God. Because as a suicidal 7th grade kid with no future, no hope, he caught me up and pulled me to himself, and he's kept me safe all these years. 50 years. I never thought I'd say 50 years about my life. That's getting old fast. He says, you then, my son. What God wants us to have in that concept is confidence that we know him. Because if you don't know that you know him, you can never be confident that you will be with him. You just kind of wonder and hope and wish and dream and maybe, I don't know. But God wants us to know that we know him. Be confident, he says. You then, my son, be confident in him.